Welcome back everyone, and welcome if you're new here. My name is Cherie and you have landed on the Top Note. I talk about fragrances here and occasionally just other random stuff that I feel like talking about. I am continuing my perfume collection series, and today the topic is the house of Tom Ford. I do have a few Tom Ford fragrances, not that many. They are quite pricey. There are probably a couple in the private collection that I'm very interested in or would like to have, but again, just the price can be a little bit prohibitive sometimes when you have a massive collection and you're wanting to smell and have available to you lots of different perfumes. So I have 4 fragrances from the signature line and 3 from the private collection that I'm going to talk about today. So the first one is Shanghai Lily. This has now been discontinued, unfortunately. So this is a beautiful, spicy, ambery floral. It's a little bit balsamic, it's a little bit dark, but not too dark. It's still totally wearable for daytime, and I have worn it to work many, many times. It actually reminds me a lot of Youth Dew by Estee Lauder, and that is my mother's signature scent. Yet it doesn't smell like Youth Dew. It just reminds me of that fragrance. And I think it's just the spicy, ambery, balsamic vibe that this has that is quite similar to Youth Dew. And so consequently, I love this fragrance because particularly when I moved across to the other side of the country from my parents, it's just one that I like to wear because I feel close to my mother and I think of my mother every time I smell this, but it gives me an opportunity to wear something similar without, smelling exactly like my mother. Not that that's a bad thing, of course. The next one is one that gets talked about quite a lot, and this is Soleil Blanc. This is a coconutty, white floral, beachy kind of scent. It's slightly woody, and I really just love the presence of tonka and benzoin in this, which is kind of, for me, a little bit unusual compared to lots of other beachy type fragrances that I've had. It still has a little bit of a kick from pepper and cardamom that's in here. There is apparently a pistachio note in the top. I don't necessarily always get pistachio from this, but I think sometimes I do pick it up. It's just not something that jumps out at me. But I think pistachio is one of those smells that doesn't necessarily command attention, It's a very subtle, nutty kind of note. Anyway, I really enjoy this one. I also have the shimmering body oil that goes with this, and I really like to wear this when we go away to beachy locations on a weekend. If we're going for a weekend away, this is sort of my little beachy mini break holiday scent, and I just really enjoy it. Performance wise, I think a lot of people complain it doesn't last very long. I think it lasts okay. I mean, at the end of the day, if I'm on a beachy holiday, I'm going to be in and out of the water. It's not going to last very long anyway. So next up is another one from the private collection. I don't have a full bottle of this. This is a decant, but I'm mentioning it in this because it is a 30ml decant, so quite sizable, and I really just love it. And I'm kind of kicking myself. I had an opportunity to buy a bottle of this sort of discounted secondhand off somebody else, and I opted to not buy that and save a bit of money and get a decant instead. And I don't know, I kind of wish I had the bottle now, but this is Noir de Noir. This is a really beautiful, spicy rose. The rose is quite dark, but it's also quite sweet. There is meant to be a chocolate note in here, and I do pick up hints of sort of a dark chocolate kind of vibe with this fragrance, but I don't find it to be chocolate forward. So if you're not a gourmand lover like myself, I wouldn't be put off trying this if you're interested in it, just because of the chocolate, because I don't think the chocolate it's not too dessert-like in this fragrance. It just gives it more of a texture and a bit of a hint of the colour, which is that dark chocolate, the noirness, I guess you could say. As I mentioned, the rose is dark but still quite sweet. There is oak moss and oud in here. It is quite mossy, but if you're put off by oak moss in sort of the style of more vintage chypre type fragrances, then I wouldn't worry too much. It's not like that at all. I think the mossiness just gives it kind of, it helps with that earthy, damp, earthy vibe that this has. So this is quite an earthy rose, really. I would describe this more as an earthy, spicy rose fragrance. And that oak moss combined with the patchouli, combined with the oud or the agarwood, just gives it that real earthiness and that nighttime vibe. But it's also quite clean. And perhaps that's partly due to the agar wood, because it's that really clean, sort of crisp oud, not the more sort of pungent oud scent. So anyway, it's a very formal black tie fragrance. It's my going out fragrance, and consequently I've not worn it for a very long time because we never really go out anymore. So I think, you know, part of me I pick it up every once in a while, and part of me wants to wear it just at home because I just want to smell it. But then other times I think, oh no, just keep it as something special that you wear out. But I don't know, maybe I will start wearing it if our lifestyle doesn't change anytime soon. The next one is widely known. This is Black Orchid. These bottles are so hard to capture because of that gold label. This I'm sure everybody already knows about, but it's basically an earthy, chocolatey floral, and the floral is that weird sort of orchid scent, that orchid accord that's obviously in a lot of this range because they're all based around orchid. It's spicy, but it's not peppery or sharp. It's not that peppery or sharp spiciness that you get or that's associated with lots of other fragrances when they have pepper and cardamom and stuff like that. The edge of the spices seems to have been taken off. It's like they're muted against or by that floral accord. It's very weird. It's just a very weird fragrance. It's very earthy and floral and kind of creamy because of that sort of dark chocolate, I think. It's very strange, and it wasn't a love at first sniff for me, but I did grow to really enjoy this, and it is quite addictive. Once you start wearing it and start appreciating it, you do sort of want to keep smelling it over and over. So yeah, I really enjoy this. I don't wear it all the time. It's definitely not an everyday fragrance for me. It would probably offend a lot of people around me, particularly as I live in a really hot climate most of the year. So it's really not something that you want to be wearing in the heat of summer. But it is a beautiful fragrance and worthy of checking it out. The next one I have is Velvet Orchid. So this is like the younger, sweeter, boozier, more ambery version of Black Orchid. Basically, it's a lot more approachable, I think, than the original Black Orchid. I feel like it's a bit fruitier as well. It's just a bit brighter, and again, it's boozier. So there is definitely, I think there's a rum note in here, and that's quite noticeable for me. Normally, I don't go for boozy kind of fragrances, but I really do like this one, and I'm not sure why this didn't get more love. I think it's been discontinued now, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure. But it doesn't seem to get as much love as, say, the Black Orchid. And possibly that's because it does have Black Orchid elements in it, and it's definitely identifiable as being part of the Black Orchid fragrance family. But for those who really love Black Orchid, it's probably a bit of an abomination because it's the more approachable, more mass appealing version of Black Orchid. And, you know, for people who want to smell really unique and different, I can understand why they perhaps wouldn't necessarily love this one, but I really like it. It's still unique, it's still different, but it's just much more wearable. And for me, again, as somebody who lives in a really hot climate, this is one that I can wear all year round, whereas Black Orchid is like the dead of winter type of fragrance for me, because any other time it's just suffocating and overpowering. Anyway, so that is Velvet Orchid. The next one is Orchid Soleil. I think this one has recently just been discontinued. This is very interesting. I did not love this fragrance when I first got it. I blind bought it and I kept it because I loved the look of the bottle. But I wore it and now I actually really like it. So it's a white floral fragrance, predominantly tuberose. It's a tuberose fragrance. It still has that kind of weird orchid accord going on, and it's very big, it's very loud. It's like the white floral beachy fragrance for really cold weather instead of being actually at the beach, if you know what I mean. So it's the kind of fragrance that you would wear in the dead of winter when you want to be reminded of your beach holidays and you want a fragrance that kind of smells like a beach holiday, but also having enough gumption to it to stick around for the cold and cut through the cold weather. This is that fragrance to me. This has notes of whipped cream and chestnut in it, which I think is what I struggled with, because it does give it kind of a gourmandy vibe to it. It also gives it a very creaminess, heavy creaminess, which I found made me feel like I wanted to gag when I first wore this. But when it dries down, it is beautiful. And when I put it on my skin, I remember having it on my skin and going, oh no, that was a bad idea. And I only sprayed it once on my arm, and this is a couple of years ago now, and I kind of wrote it off. I just tried to ignore it for a little while. And then later in the day, I was sort of going back and smelling my arm and thinking, wow, this smells really good, but I couldn't remember what I'd sprayed because I'd sprayed a few things on. And eventually I figured out it was this that I had sprayed on. It was beautiful. I really loved it. I just have to get past the opening, which is a real blast of that sort of heavy creaminess and chestnutty. There is a nuttiness to this fragrance, and for me, I just struggle with that a little bit because it does, it can make me feel a little bit nauseous. There is oddly something else in this fragrance that I don't know what it is, because there's certainly nothing listed that I can see that would impart this smell in the fragrance, but there is something in here that I get that smells almost tea-like, and I don't get it all the time, and it's often drowned out by the big fleshy white florals, but there is something in here which I think lightens the overall fragrance and makes it more palatable for me when I can't stand, you know, those really heavy, creamy, gourmandy fragrances. It's just something that cuts through that creaminess a little bit, and I think that's it. It's kind of like a transient thing that I only really get, I think, probably in the mid, when it's moving from that really sort of loud opening to a more subtle, much more balanced tuberose fragrance. And look, I don't know what it is, but it's just something that I've noticed with this fragrance, and I'm curious to know if anyone else gets that, because again, like, there's no tea note listed in the notes listing, but then I'm sure there's lots of stuff in here that's not listed in the published material. So anyway, I really enjoy this fragrance. I mean, if you do like those sort of white florally beachy kind of fragrances, then definitely see if you can get hold of it. It's a really good one for cold weather, actually, but it also works well in summer, obviously, if you can handle the opening. Last but definitely not least, this is one that I just picked up today, so perhaps take my enthusiasm for this fragrance for the moment with a grain of salt, because I'm still very much in the first blush of infatuation with this particular fragrance. I have smelled this before, but I've never owned the bottle, and then it was discontinued and I never managed to get hold of it. Well, somebody was selling this recently and locally, and I went and picked it up. This is Tom Ford Violet Blonde. And this, to me, I think there is a violet element to this fragrance for sure, but to me it's more irisy than violety. Oh wow, it's so good. This is going to be my scent of the day today. This is like a grown-up, less sweet insolence with a hefty dose of musk and jasmine, and ingeniously a hint of suede. And I think that is what makes this fragrance just the bomb. I mean, I love it. I really, really love it. So different, so beautiful. It has a powderiness that's not too much, even though there's, I think, a decent dose of iris and orris root in here. But, oh, that suede, it's just so good. It's so good. It gives it this sort of powdery, slightly powdery, but also fuzzy vibe. And I don't know, I guess that's how suede is, isn't it, really? It's very elegant. It's very grown up. I just adore it. I will say it's not going to be for everybody, because it does smell a bit like quite a grown up fragrance. It smells a bit vintagey. So it's not going to be for everybody, particularly if you are a big lover of, say, an insolence or something like that. You might not love this quite so much, because it's not as sweet and it's not as approachable. You know, I think somebody wearing this, whilst they, as a person, they may be very approachable, they may not smell that approachable, because it is it's kind of a little bit standoffish, I think, this fragrance. Anyway, I love it. I do have it on my skin already, and I'm in bliss right now smelling myself. So that is Velvet Blonde by Tom Ford. Thank you, Tom Ford. So we have come to the end of my Tom Ford collection. It's not really that big, although I was actually surprised at how big it is, given I didn't think I actually owned that many Tom Ford fragrances. And as I said, there are a couple from the private collection that I do have my eye on, but I don't know, you just can't buy everything when you have lots of perfume, because you would never eat, or possibly wouldn't have a roof over your head. So I guess I just need to start embracing decants and samples a little bit more, which I think I am this year. I think I'm doing well. Anyway, so I'm rambling. If you enjoyed this, please do give it a thumbs up. Let me know what your favourite Tom Ford fragrances are, or which ones you think I should try, because there's many I haven't tried yet. I will leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.